They say money can buy anything except anonymity from the internet. One crisp summer morning, billionaire industrialist David Harrington thought he'd scored the perfect getaway with a bewitching companion half his age. Sunlit waves shimmered behind them in an Instagram post he never dreamed would shatter his life. Within hours, a fiery storm of comments erupted, accusing the mysterious woman of being someone far more dangerous than she appeared. The rumors spiraled into a full-blown exposé that threatened not just David's crumbling marriage, but also his image and legacy. In a single click, the world learned that secrets, no matter how well funded, rarely remain buried. David Harrington had always been a man who commanded attention the instant he walked into a room. At 6 feet 2 inches, with tailored suits that seemed to drape his athletic frame flawlessly, he radiated a polished self-assurance cultivated over decades of hard work and strategic gambles. Born in Chicago to a middle-class family, David displayed an early flair for numbers and negotiation. By the time he was in college, he'd already built 2 small businesses, one reselling refurbished laptops out of his dorm, and another importing artisanal leather wallets from Italy. He was a hustler in the best sense of the word, unrelenting in his pursuit of prosperity. When he turned 25, David took his biggest risk yet. He convinced an angel investor named Richard Carmichael, a man revered for his savvy in emerging markets, to pour $500,000 into a software automation startup David co-founded. It was an audacious move, especially in a market saturated with bigger, more established players. But David's persuasion worked. Within 18 months, the startup was acquired by a larger tech conglomerate, netting David his first major fortune. It was the start of an illustrious career that would see him founding or funding a series of successful ventures into technology, real estate, and even renewable energy. By his mid-30s, David Harrington was wealthy beyond imagination, yet his ambition burned brighter. He was rarely satisfied. Gone were the days of renting modest apartments and living on fast food. He now presided over a sprawling empire, complete with offices in New York, London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. He jetted around the globe for business deals, indulging in the high-life trappings, private yachts membership at exclusive clubs, and a mansion perched atop the Hollywood Hills with a ski-line view that glittered like diamonds at night. But hidden beneath the aura of success was a restless void. He was married, yes, to the beautiful and accomplished Sarah Whitmore. They met at a charity event in Los Angeles, bonding over a shared passion for philanthropy. Sarah, an Ivy League-educated lawyer turned environmental activist, had grown up in a similarly middle-class background. She understood David's drive and matched him in intellect. For a while they seemed the ultimate power couple, publicly philanthropic, privately fierce in their love and ambitions. However, time and relentless pursuit of more money placed stress cracks in their marriage. David's constant travel, late-night negotiations, and if rumors were to be believed, unstoppable appetite for new experiences, all weighed heavily on Sarah. As David's orbit expanded, she found herself increasingly sidelined, overshadowed by the gravitational pull of his ambitions. Even the philanthropic causes they once championed together were neglected. David wrote the checks, but rarely bothered to attend the galas or volunteer events anymore. By the time he was in his early 40s, the heart of their relationship had eroded, replaced by polite tolerance and carefully orchestrated public appearances. That was the environment in which David would eventually make a series of decisions, culminating in the scandal that would rock his world. Fueled by ego and weary of the stale comfort his marriage had devolved into, he sought excitement elsewhere. He believed he was untouchable, convinced his well-oiled team of advisors and the iron curtain of wealth could conceal any indiscretions. But David Harrington was about to learn one of life's harshest truths in the digital era. Every secret has a lifespan. All it takes is a single post for an empire's pristine facade to come crashing down. Sarah Whitmore Harrington was no stranger to adversity. Raised by a single mother in a modest Chicago neighborhood, she thrived academically, eventually securing a full scholarship to Columbia University. While her classmates carried designer purses and took spring breaks in Europe, Sarah juggled part-time jobs at coffee shops and university libraries. She took pride in her self-reliance, never shying away from hard work and rigorous study. By her mid-20s, Sarah was practicing corporate law at a prestigious Manhattan firm. She was brilliant, resilient, and notably empathetic. Those qualities caught the attention of an internal pro bono committee, which led her to champion several environmental cases against big corporations. Her compassion for the underdog and her deep sense of justice made her a formidable foe in legal negotiations. She even won a high-profile lawsuit that forced a major chemical company to pay millions in damages to a marginalized community. The victory made headlines, and from that moment, Sarah became recognized not just as a skilled lawyer, but as a warrior for ethical responsibility. That was how she met David at a black tie fundraiser in Los Angeles, where he presented a sizable check to the environmental organization she represented. The sparks flew instantly. In him, she saw a titan with an innate gift for making money, and an equally fervent philanthropic side, an individual who could potentially reshape industries for the better. In her, he saw a steadfast spirit, beautiful both inside and out, and a partner whose intellect could match his. Their courtship was whirlwind. They dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, attended exclusive events, and traveled abroad to meet potential charity partners in places like Nairobi and Mumbai. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish beach ceremony in Maui, complete with dignitaries, celebrities, and the who's who of venture capital in attendance. However, the transition from newlyweds to a stable marriage was rocky. David's businesses, spread across multiple sectors, demanded constant attention and travel. Meanwhile, Sarah transitioned from corporate law to running her own not-for-profit legal consultancy for environmental issues, an endeavor that required significant energy and focus. They saw each other less and less. The times they did manage to reconnect were overshadowed by David's phone calls, emails, and text notifications. Despite the cracks in their relationship, Sarah believed she still knew David better than anyone else. She sensed when he was exhausted, recognized when his bravado was merely a cover for deeper anxieties. She also recognized as his success soared to new heights that he was falling into certain patterns, seeking novelty, losing interest in things that once mattered, constantly pushing boundaries. But she never quite dared to voice her growing suspicions. She wanted to preserve their public image, and more critically, she didn't want to face the reality that her husband might be cheating. Then the subtle shifts started. David became secretive about his phone, quickly changing screens when she walked by. He started going on business trips to places that made no sense, or at times that were uncharacteristic for the industries he worked in. Once Sarah found a diamond bracelet in his study desk, one that was clearly not for her, as she had never once expressed interest in that style, nor had he gifted her something similar in years. She brushed it off, attributing it to a possible gift for a female investor or sponsor. But deep down, she suspected. Sarah thought about confronting him multiple times, yet her pride held her back. In her mind, relationships were built on honesty and trust, but confronting David without proof felt like a betrayal of her self-respect. She wanted certainty. She needed to be sure. In the quiet corners of her soul, she wondered if it might be easier to look away, to focus on her philanthropic work, and to let David chase his illusions. After all, they maintained a semblance of stability. They weren't short on money. Her beloved mother was comfortable living in a gorgeous townhouse that Sarah and David financed. On the surface, her life seemed perfect. But as the months rolled on, Sarah felt a gathering storm, an anxiety that gnawed at her. Something in her marriage and David was shifting. For all her accomplishments, for all her unwavering character, she was powerless to stop whatever was happening. A sense of impending disaster loomed. She could almost hear the faint thunderclap on the horizon. She just didn't know how or when it would strike, only that it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. David Harrington first laid eyes on Layla St. James at a private art exhibit in Soho. The event was one of those exclusive gatherings of the ultra-wealthy and avant-garde, a place to see and be seen. She stood in front of a painting, a swirl of neon colors, something abstract and disorienting, and seemed lost in thought. She wore a simple yet elegant emerald green dress, her tawny hair falling in loose waves down her back. David was immediately intrigued by her aura of quiet confidence. He approached her fully expecting that easy spark he often found in conversations. Layla, however, surprised him. She greeted him with polite warmth, but spoke with a self-assuredness and intellectual depth that caught him off guard. She was not overly impressed by his status or money. At least she didn't show it in the usual fawning way. Instead, she asked him questions about his philanthropic endeavors, referencing a literacy program in Southeast Asia that David's foundation had once funded. Few people outside his close circle even knew about that. It was an obscure project, overshadowed by his more flashy contributions. Fascinated by her knowledge, he pressed further. Layla revealed she was an art historian by training, had worked in Europe's auction circuit, and recently moved to New York to pursue her own gallery aspirations. She claimed she had grown tired of the pretentiousness in traditional art circles and wanted to start a space that embraced both established and emerging artists. Over a cocktail in the exhibit's VIP lounge, Layla recounted travel stories from her time in Paris, how she'd negotiated million-dollar deals for rare impressionist works. Her voice dripped with a delicate, almost musical accent. David couldn't quite place a mix, she said, from traveling around the world. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged numbers. David found himself texting Layla at odd hours discussing art-world politics and eventually drifting into flirtation. Layla reciprocated, sprinkling their conversations with subtle compliments and innuendo that kept David on his toes. It felt like a dance one that David had not experienced in a long time. Sarah had once been his intellectual equal, but now their discussions were overshadowed by property deals, lawsuits, and superficial gatherings. Layla offered something new, something fresh. Their first real date came under the guise of a business meeting at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Midtown. David told himself he was merely exploring philanthropic collaboration, maybe funding an art initiative Layla had proposed. But by dessert, they were lost in each other's eyes. A wave of guilt threatened to crash over David, but he quelled it with a glass of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, rationalizing that he deserved happiness. Life was too short, and he had worked too hard. If he couldn't indulge once in a while, what was the point of all this success? Days turned into weeks, and he found every excuse to see Layla. A hotel suite at the Pierre, a weekend in the Hamptons. David claimed he had an urgent real estate matter to attend to. Layla was always there, radiant, engaging, confident in her allure. But there was something else about her, a certain mystery that David couldn't pinpoint. She rarely spoke about her family or past relationships. She was cagey whenever he asked about the specifics of her work in Europe. His curiosity was piqued, but the thrill of their clandestine encounters overshadowed any red flags. In private moments, Layla would talk about the future, teasing a world where they might be more public in their romance. David smiled, uncertain if he could ever cross that line. He was still tethered by a marriage that he had not fully admitted was over. Yet Layla's world was intoxicating and like a moth drawn to flame. He ignored the risk. The more David's desire grew, the more brazen he became about their affair. Eventually, a reckless idea took shape in his mind. He had a beachside villa in Belize that was rarely used. Perhaps a little tropical escape was just what they needed. Sun, sand, and secrecy far from prying eyes. Layla loved the idea, squealing with excitement at the notion of turquoise waters and private cabanas. They decided on a date, making hush-hush travel plans through David's private jet. In David's mind, this was a contained fantasy, a secret paradise sealed away from the rest of his life. No one would ever know. They would be safe to indulge, if only for a few days. He should have remembered that secrets don't stay buried forever. And with social media's insatiable appetite for drama, a single misstep could set off a chain reaction he'd never see coming. The villa in Belize was a pristine haven surrounded by palm trees, with a private stretch of powdery white sand extending into azure waters. It was the kind of place people only see in glossy travel magazines, one David rarely got to enjoy, thanks to his busy schedule. Layla's eyes sparkled when they arrived. She ran to the ocean's edge, letting the warm waves lap at her feet. David watched her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Somewhere in the recesses of his conscience, a small voice asked, "Is this worth it?" He silenced it, enticed by the vision of Layla on the beach. Each morning they lounged under canopied daybeds, sipping tropical cocktails and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves. David felt more alive than he had in years. He indulged in Layla's laughter, her spontaneous dances in the sand, the ways she made him forget about corporate boardrooms and stifling responsibilities. This was freedom, no obligations, no routine, just the two of them enjoying life's simple pleasures. On the second day, after a lazy breakfast of fresh mangoes and coffee, Layla teased David with a challenge. "Let's take a picture, something special to remember this trip by." David hesitated. He had always maintained a strict no social media posts policy when it came to his private affairs. But the sunlight was dancing off the ocean, and Layla looked radiant in her turquoise bikini. She draped herself across a beach lounger, beckoning him closer. David relented, pulling out his phone. He snapped a few pictures of them together. Layla's head on his chest, the glimmering ocean behind them. Laughing, they flipped through the shots, choosing their favorites. Layla posted a couple of photos on her own discreet account set to private. She had only a handful of followers, mostly art world acquaintances, she said. David shrugged, telling himself that a handful of people with no ties to his life wouldn't make a difference. Still, he felt a pang of anxiety at the possibility of any slip. Emboldened by the day's carefree vibe, David grew reckless. Late that evening, after a lavish dinner prepared by the villa's private chef, Layla pressed herself against him and giggled. "Let's show off just a bit. Let's make them jealous." She grabbed his phone and teased him with an Instagram story post. "Just a quick shot of the sunset," she said, with a silhouette of them toasting wine glasses. She promised it wouldn't give away too much. "No faces, no location tags," she whispered. Caught up in the evening's romantic intoxication, David acquiesced. He posted it. The immediate response from his followers was mild people admired the sunset, the luxurious atmosphere. But within minutes, eagle-eyed fans began to notice small details, the shape of a woman's figure in the reflection of the glass door, the second wine glass in David's hand. A few commented, enjoying a romantic getaway. David, others posted heart emojis and asked, "Where's Sarah?" That was the first red flag. David ignored it, telling himself it was harmless speculation. The next morning, in a haze of euphoria, David made a grave mistake. While Layla was frolicking in the waves, he snapped a candid shot of her, capturing her face in profile, then posted it to his main feed with a cryptic caption, "A moment of peace in paradise." He truly believed it was ambiguous enough that no one would identify her. He never tagged her account, never mentioned her name. But the internet has a way of connecting the dots. Within minutes, the post garnered thousands of likes. Then came the comments, some supportive, many curious, a few, laced with suspicion. A handful of David's close friends texted him directly. "Who is she?" Some used winking emojis, half joking. Others were more direct, worried that this could blow back on him if Sarah saw it. Unperturbed, David turned off his phone notifications, wanting to stay in their bubble of paradise a little while longer. It was on the final day of their trip that reality began to intrude. Unbeknownst to David, a tabloid blogger had recognized Layla's face from a rumor that had circulated in certain high society circles, an art dealer with a dubious past, rumored to seduce wealthy clients, rumored to have left Europe under a cloud of scandal. The blogger had ties to gossip circles across the globe and had access to hush-hush sources in the European art scene. By the time David and Layla boarded his private jet for the return flight to New York, the blogger was already working on an exposé cross-referencing images and combing through digital footprints. The seeds of disaster were planted, and neither David nor Layla had any clue that a social media storm was brewing. They touched down in New York that evening, stepping back into a world that would soon turn on them with alarming speed. For David, the beach vacation was a blissful memory. For the internet, it became the catalyst for a scandal that would reshape everything he thought he knew about his mistress, his marriage, and even himself. When David checked his phone after landing, he noticed a barrage of missed calls and frantic texts, primarily from his closest business associates and his public relations officer, Jacqueline Nguyen. His heart pounded as he glanced at the notifications. Typically, such a flurry of calls indicated a major development, a collapsed deal, maybe a crisis in one of his overseas offices. But as he skimmed through them, he realized the panic was personal, not professional. "David, call me ASAP." One text from Jacqueline read, "We have a problem on Instagram." Confused and apprehensive, he dialed Jacqueline's number. She picked up immediately, her voice strained. "David, you need to delete that post right now," she blurted before he could speak. "Calm down, Jackie." He attempted trying to maintain composure. "What's going on?" She launched into a rapid-fire explanation. "Your post with that woman on the beach." Someone recognized her. Comments are exploding. There's a rumor swirling that she's a con artist who allegedly scammed an art collector in Paris. People are sharing screenshots, old articles, everything. It's going viral. They're calling her the art world grifter. This is beyond just an affair rumor. This could turn into a full-blown scandal. David's head spun. He had braced himself for gossip about a potential mistress, but allegations of criminal activity took the situation to an entirely different level. He ended the call immediately, opened Instagram, and gaped at the flood of comments. Many asked, Is that Layla St. James? Others claimed she was wanted for questioning in Europe. Some linked to half-baked investigative pieces from obscure blogs. And then there were the moral judgments, David Harrington. How could you cheat on your wife with a criminal respect lost? Hypocrite. A real philanthropist wouldn't be with a con artist. Layla, who was seated beside him in his chauffeured car, scrolled through her own phone. He could see the color drain from her face. "David, we need to talk," she whispered, voice shaky. Not willing to address the situation in the car, he texted his driver to head to one of his discreet penthouse properties in Manhattan. He couldn't go home to his mansion. Sarah was likely there, and a confrontation now would be disastrous. Layla's expression was that of panic fused with indignation. "I don't understand why they're saying these things," she kept muttering. "I'm not a criminal." She tried to show him what she claimed were legitimate references from her past employers, though David barely glanced at them. Once they arrived at the penthouse, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Layla collapsed onto a plush sofa. David paced phone in hand, reading through messages from colleagues, PR consultants, and even lawyers. His empire was built on a carefully curated image of competence and ethics. Any hint of scandal could harm investor confidence. And the fact that Sarah, widely respected in legal and philanthropic circles, might soon find out, was another ticking bomb. "I need you to tell me everything," David demanded, voice taut with urgency. "Why are people calling you a grifter? Were you accused of something in Europe? Tell me now, Layla." She exhaled, trembling. "I never scammed anyone. I was involved with a wealthy French collector. Yes, but I left because he was controlling and abusive. He spread rumors about me to cover his tracks. I never faced any charges. None of it is true." David studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. He had believed her wholeheartedly until this moment, but now his instincts sounded alarms. Something in her eyes. Was it fear, or was it guilt? The swirling chaos of the moment made it hard to read. A sense of betrayal and dread took hold of him. He realized that even if Layla was innocent, the public didn't care. Gossip and scandal had already latched onto them. The internet feeds on controversy, and they had served it up on a silver platter. The damage might already be done. Over the next few hours, David's crisis management team mobilized. He engaged his top-notch legal counsel, pressing them to craft a statement denying any criminal association. Jacqueline orchestrated a digital damage control strategy, locking down comments, removing the offending post, and issuing official disclaimers that any claims about Layla's criminal background were unsubstantiated rumors. But the internet had already taken screenshots. The post lived on in countless retweets and reshares. Worse still, the mainstream media was picking it up now. A celebrity gossip show ran a segment featuring the blurred-out images of David and Layla on the beach with a dramatic voiceover billionaire, David Harrington's rumored mistress, international con artist, or misunderstood muse. Speculative headlines mushroomed across tabloids, often accompanied by pictures of Sarah, his wronged wife, looking stoic and poised at past charity events. On top of everything, phone calls from Sarah began lighting up David's screen. He couldn't bring himself to answer. His mind whirled in panic, trying to figure out how to spin this. He composed text after text to Sarah, erasing them before sending any. There was no easy way to explain. Perhaps the best he could do was beg for her forgiveness and attempt some sort of damage limitation. David, Layla said softly, breaking the tense silence. "I need you to believe me. I'm not who they say I am." He looked at her, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We'll figure this out." He managed, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. But the question that truly haunted him was, had he been duped? And if so, was it just by a cunning seductress, or also by his own naive desire for excitement and novelty? The answer wouldn't remain hidden for long. The internet had taken hold of this scandal, and soon even darker revelations would surface, forcing David to confront secrets far more devastating than an affair. While David and Layla tried to contain the inferno in Manhattan, Sarah Harrington was at home, feeling as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. Initially, she had ignored the handful of texts from friends, hinting at David's suspicious Instagram post. She was used to rumors. But then her best friend, Monica Alvarez, sent a message that rattled her. "Please check the tabloids." "I'm so sorry, Sarah." With shaky hands, Sarah clicked a link Monica had forwarded. She saw David's Instagram post, the silhouette of a woman on a beach, and the avalanche of salacious comments and allegations. Her first reaction was numbness, an eerie calm that spread through her limbs. She had suspected David might be unfaithful, but seeing it unfold publicly was a different kind of pain. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. It was her mother, distressed and confused about the swirling rumors. Embarrassment flooded Sarah, a hot flush crawling up her cheeks. She assured her mother she was fine, even though her heart felt as if it were cracking in half. She forced herself to remain steady, telling her mother not to believe everything she read online. But the numbness soon gave way to anger, then heartbreak, then an odd sense of relief. At least now the rumors were in the open. No more doubts, no more illusions. She spent the next few hours pacing the living room, rereading old messages from David, analyzing their marriage from every angle. She felt a mixture of betrayal and odd detachment, as though she were hovering above herself, watching it all unfold from a distance. A short while later, David's chauffeur arrived at the mansion, dropping off a large black envelope. Sarah took it, opened it, and found legal documents inside, some half-baked statements from David's attorneys, disclaimers about the alleged mistress's background, and an apologetic note that ended with, "Please do not speak to the press. I will explain everything." There was no real apology, no admission of guilt. Just corporate-sounding instructions. It was like receiving a memo from a CEO to a subordinate, rather than a heartfelt message from a husband to his wife. Furious, she called David multiple times, but each attempt went to voicemail. She left a single message. "You owe me an explanation. David, I'm not some PR problem to be handled." Then she hung up, refusing to try again. That evening, as she attempted to navigate the swirling confusion, she received another unexpected visitor. Michael Whitmore, her cousin and fellow attorney, who also worked for a prestigious Los Angeles firm. Michael was in New York on business and had seen the online furore. He arrived unannounced, a supportive presence Sarah desperately needed. They sat in the living room, the mansion feeling too large, too grand for the gloom enveloping it. Sarah poured them both glasses of wine, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She recounted the situation, her suspicions, the damning Instagram post, the rumors about the mistress's criminal past. She felt exposed, humiliated. Michael listened patiently, asking pointed questions. "So this woman Layla might be a con artist," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Do we know if it's true?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't know anything anymore. I thought I knew David, but now I'm not so sure." Michael offered a thoughtful nod. "Look, Sarah, I can help you. Legally. We can figure out your options, whether it's a separation, a divorce, or simply negotiations for your protection. You shouldn't trust his attorneys. They'll protect him first. Sarah sighed, leaning back into the sofa's cushions. I appreciate that, but I need time to think. My marriage is on the line, and if this woman really is dangerous, I don't want to rush into any decisions I'll regret. Michael placed his hand over hers. I understand. But be cautious. Men like David with power and money can become unpredictable under pressure. Do what you must to protect yourself emotionally, legally, financially. That night, Sarah tried to sleep, but nightmares plagued her images of David and Layla on a beach swirling tabloids and faceless gossipers pointing fingers at her. The next morning, she decided she wouldn't be silent. If David wouldn't provide clarity, she would find it on her own. She scheduled a meeting with her own legal advisors, ignoring the suggestion in David's letter to remain quiet. She reached out to her charitable partners, confirming that she would continue her activism work, regardless of the scandal. The last thing she needed was for her philanthropic efforts to be overshadowed by her husband's affair. Amid the emotional turmoil, a flicker of her old resolve appeared. Sarah refused to let David's betrayal define her. If anything, it fortified her determination. If the woman in the scandal truly was a con artist, Sarah intended to expose the lies. And if the rumors were false, she would force David to explain why he had put her through this mortifying ordeal. From that point on, Sarah began her own quiet investigation. Friends in the art world, acquaintances in legal networks across Europe, she reached out to anyone who might have a lead on Layla St. James. She had no illusions that discovering the truth would fix her marriage, but at least she wouldn't be a passive spectator to her own humiliation. Little did she know her search for answers would set off the next wave of revelations, drawing her into a labyrinth of secrets deeper and more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Back at David's penthouse, tension hung in the air like a stagnant fog. Layla paced the living room, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages and calls. She ignored most, focusing instead on David, who was huddled over his laptop in a makeshift war room arrangement with his PR team via video conference. The official statements they had released weren't silencing the rumors. If anything, the chatter online seemed to grow louder, especially on niche art world forums. Jacqueline's voice crackled through the laptop speakers. David, we have to address these allegations head-on. We found some references to Layla's possible involvement with a French collector named Jean-Louis Moreau. He's rumored to have lost a significant sum purchasing forgeries from an unknown intermediary, someone described as an attractive American woman. Some people are linking that story to Layla. We need to refute this or confirm it. Refute it. Layla interjected, indignation flaring in her eyes. It's a smear campaign by a bitter ex. I've told David this already. David sighed. Do we have any evidence that you didn't do these things? Layla. Something official. Legal documents proving your innocence. She glowered, crossing her arms. I never faced formal charges. That's all the proof I have. Jacqueline's voice softened. That's not enough for the court of public opinion. They want something concrete. With a heavy sigh, David ended the call, promising to regroup later. He turned to face Layla, who was hugging herself defensively. I need the truth, he said quietly. I'm not accusing you, but if there's any detail you left out, I need to know. Her eyes flickered. Then she told him her story. Layla claimed she had indeed worked with Jean-Louis Moreau, one of France's most influential collectors, who hired her to help him scout and acquire valuable pieces. According to Layla, Jean-Louis was arrogant and manipulative, eventually pressuring her into a toxic affair. As she tried to distance herself professionally and personally, Jean-Louis began to sabotage her reputation, planting rumors of forgery and fraud. Layla insisted she had zero involvement in any wrongdoing and fled Europe after receiving threats from Jean-Louis' associates. She'd been attempting to rebuild her life in New York, severing all ties with that dark chapter. David listened, half wanting to believe her. The story was plausible enough. Rich men had used their influence to destroy someone's reputation before. But a nagging doubt remained. Layla was still omitting details. "What about the rumors you drugged him and stole money?" David asked, referencing a particularly sensational claim circulating online. Her cheeks reddened. Utter lies. Fabricated. "I don't do drugs. I hardly even drink. I've never stolen a cent from anyone in my life. Don't you see, he's punishing me because I left him." David studied her trembling lip, the tears welling in her eyes. He wanted to comfort her, to accept her story at face value. But the stakes were too high. His empire was in jeopardy, and if Layla was hiding something, the fallout could be catastrophic. Yet the thought of losing her, the excitement she brought into his life, filled him with dread. So he decided to proceed cautiously, choosing to believe her for the moment, but resolved to do his own thorough checks. He called in favors from private investigators he had used in corporate deals. Within hours, they began scouring European legal records, court documents, and any traces of Layla's past, all while David prepared for the next wave of media scrutiny. The scandal showed no signs of abating. Then, in a surprising twist, David's phone rang with a call from none other than Jean-Louis Moreau himself. A few months prior, David had made casual acquaintance with Moreau at a Monaco charity event. Now the French collector was reaching out directly, presumably, to discuss the fiasco. With Layla fidgeting nervously nearby, David accepted the call. On speaker, Jean-Louis' accented voice flowed smoothly. "Ah, Monsieur Harrington. I see we have a common acquaintance." David cleared his throat. "Apparently so. I'd like to get to the bottom of this. You're aware of the rumors." A condescending chuckle crackled over the speaker. "Rumors, yes. But they are not rumors, monsieur. The woman you call Layla St. James, if that's her real name, defrauded me. She introduced me to forged artwork, manipulated me emotionally, then disappeared with large commissions. I have evidence. I attempted legal action, but she slipped away." Layla blanched, shaking her head vehemently at David. David pressed. "She claims you invented these lies because she ended a personal relationship with you." A harsh laugh erupted from Jean-Louis. "Personal relationship? She seduced me for one purpose, to gain access to my network and my finances. I warn you, Harrington, this is a dangerous woman. She is skilled at deception. If you continue to involve yourself with her, your name, your empire, both will burn." The call ended abruptly. Layla broke into tears, insisting Jean-Louis was lying, that he was the manipulator. David stood there, torn. On one hand, he despised Jean-Louis's smug tone and recognized how men of power often rewrite history to blame women. On the other, the man's conviction was chilling. Could it all be true? David's private investigators would soon deliver a preliminary report, but the emotional stakes were skyrocketing. If Layla was innocent, David would stand by her. If she was guilty, he risked his fortune, his reputation, everything. And all the while, Sarah loomed in the background, her silence perhaps more threatening than any media outlet. That night, David slept fitfully plagued by dreams of forging art and forging love, unable to discern which illusions were real. Little did he know the truth would be more complicated and more shocking than he could ever anticipate. By the following morning, David's investigators had sent a cryptic message. "We have substantial findings. Meeting recommended." He arranged for them to come to the penthouse, carefully scheduling it when Layla would be out. She had departed earlier to clear her head, though David wondered if she was actually meeting someone else. Just after noon, two stoic men in suits arrived, introducing themselves as Morgan Harris and Philip Zhao. David led them into the study, shutting the door behind them. Their expressions were grim. Morgan began. "Mr. Harrington, we've identified two separate legal dockets in Paris and Brussels that involve an American woman with a similar profile to Ms. St. James. The name used was not Layla St. James, but Linda McPherson." Same initials, LM Philip continued. "The charges were dropped in one case and settled out of court in another. Both involved allegations of art fraud and misrepresentation. The documents list an unidentified male accomplice." David leaned forward, his pulse pounding. "Are we sure this is the same woman?" Morgan nodded. "We have a 78% facial recognition match between photos from archived news articles and the images you provided us of Ms. St. James. A strong likelihood it's her." A nauseating dread coursed through David's veins. "Any sign of Jean-Louis Moreau's involvement?" Philip replied. "He's mentioned in the Brussels docket as a complaining witness. The details were sealed, but we suspect a settlement was reached behind closed doors." David sank into his chair, his mind a kaleidoscope of betrayal and rage. He thought of confronting Layla, but a text on his phone interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Unknown number. "If you want to keep certain secrets from your wife and the public, it'll cost you $5 million. Wire instructions to follow." Accompanying the text was a single photograph, a candid shot of David and Layla in an intimate moment on the Belize beach, far more revealing than anything posted on social media. Clearly, someone had been photographing them. The angle suggested a drone or a long-range camera. And now they wanted money. David clenched his jaw. "I'm being blackmailed," he growled, showing Morgan and Philip the text. They exchanged worried looks, cautioning David not to make any hasty moves. This could be linked to Ms. St. James's alleged accomplice, Morgan offered. "We've seen this pattern before." Seething, David dismissed them. He needed a plan. A quiet hush money payment would only encourage more extortion down the line. Yet ignoring the threat could lead to even greater exposure. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that Layla herself might be part of this scheme, another elaborate con. But a flicker of doubt lingered. Perhaps Layla truly was a victim, and her old accomplice was extorting them both. He decided he needed to corner Layla that very evening. No more half-truths or evasion. He wanted her entire story. If she lied or faltered, he'd cut her off and let the legal system do its worst. But if she persuaded him of her innocence, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could face this together. Hours later, Layla returned. David wasted no time. "We need to talk," he said curtly, leading her into the study. She looked apprehensive, eyes darting to the closed door. He showed her the blackmail text and the incriminating photo. He then presented the investigative report, the name Linda McPherson, the out-of-court settlements. With every piece of information, Layla's face paled further. When he finished, an uneasy silence settled. Layla's lips quivered. Then she began to speak, voice trembling. "I'm not Linda McPherson. That was my sister." A new tale spilled forth, each revelation more shocking than the last. Layla insisted she had a twin sister raised separately after a messy divorce in her childhood. The sister was the one who got entangled with Jean-Louis, forging art and leveraging Layla's identity. Layla claimed she tried to help her sister out of the mess, but it spiraled beyond control. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I fled to America to escape that chaos. My sister threatened to drag me down with her. I changed my name legally to distance myself from her record. David, I swear I've never defrauded anyone. I thought you'd never understand, so I kept it hidden. David's mind reeled. The idea of a twin, a doppelganger who could have orchestrated these crimes, sounded outrageous, but not impossible. Layla sobbed, claiming her sister was the blackmailer, the one who had been snapping secret photos and demanding money. She's punishing me for leaving her behind, for not bailing her out again. The story was so elaborate, so twisted. David's gut wrenched with conflicting emotions. The puzzle pieces fit a little too well, yet Layla's tears seemed genuine. He remembered how she had always been vague about her family, how frightened she seemed whenever he asked about her past. Could this all be real? Wrestling with his doubts, David found himself making a decision based on a precarious blend of logic and emotion. If what you're saying is true, we need proof, he said, voice stern. We'll involve my investigators. We'll find your sister, and we'll end this blackmail. Layla nodded, relieved. Whatever it takes. I'll do anything. A fragile truce formed between them that night. David, driven by a potent mix of fear, pride, and infatuation, chose to believe Layla at least temporarily. He vowed to protect her from the blackmailer, from the swirling rumors, from everything. Yet in the darkness of the penthouse, as Layla slept fitfully in the next room, David stared out the window at the glowing city lights, wondering if he'd just made the greatest mistake of his life. While David grappled with the twin sister revelation, Sarah conducted her own inquiry, determined to uncover the truth about Layla St. James. Through her legal network, she managed to contact a renowned French attorney named René Fournier, who had once handled a high-profile art fraud case involving Jean-Louis Moreau. Via a series of lengthy email exchanges, Sarah pieced together a confounding puzzle. According to René, there had indeed been an American woman at the center of the Moreau scandal. Someone who used multiple aliases, among them Linda and Layla. Official documents were sealed, but rumors suggested the woman had an accomplice, possibly a family member. René also hinted that the entire fiasco nearly extended into a broader European crime syndicate. But before any formal charges could stick, the woman vanished. Moreau had enough influence to keep the scandal out of mainstream news, presumably to save face. But the rumor mill churned relentlessly behind closed doors. Sarah's instincts told her that David's mistress had some connection to that case, but she wanted concrete proof. She scrolled through obscure websites, reading half-legible Google translations of French tabloids looking for any mention of sisters or twins. Then she stumbled on a small blog post from years ago that mentioned a sibling duo suspected of art forgery, one rumored to be involved with Moreau. The post cited no official documents, but the narrative was eerily similar to Layla's story. Frustrated, yet fueled by this partial validation, Sarah pressed further. She reached out to an old law school acquaintance in Brussels, who was now a mid-level judicial clerk. Within a day, the acquaintance confirmed that sealed records existed involving a Linda McPherson, but he couldn't access details without risking his career. He did, however, confirm the mention of a sister in the sealed complaint. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. Layla might indeed have a twin, a partner in crime, or a separate individual entirely. Either possibility spelled trouble for David, and by extension, Sarah. If Layla had roped David into a blackmail scheme, the scandal could destroy his reputation and the philanthropic work Sarah herself cherished. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in an even more unexpected way. Late one afternoon, Sarah received a cryptic text from a number labeled Unknown. Meet me at the Green Leaf Cafe on 5th. I have information about Layla. Come alone. A friend. Wary of a trap. Sarah nearly ignored it, but curiosity and a desire to protect herself compelled her to go. She arrived at the cafe, a cozy, dimly lit space, scanning the patrons nervously. A tall, lean man in a baseball cap stood and waved her over. As she approached, he took off the cap, revealing salt and pepper hair. She recognized him vaguely from a magazine cover, Jean-Louis Moreau. Her heart hammered as she sat down, unsure how to proceed. Moreau spoke first, his English tinged with a delicate accent. Mrs. Harrington, thank you for coming. I apologize for the clandestine approach, but we share a common predicament. She regarded him with cold caution. You claim to have information about Layla St. James. His lips curled into a faint smile. Or Linda McPherson, or whatever she calls herself these days. Sarah's breath caught. So it's true. Moreau leaned in. I contacted your husband, but he seems enamored by her. Or perhaps she's convinced him of a sob story. Either way, he is not receptive. But you, Mrs. Harrington, you have more at stake if this escalates further. He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah opened it to find printed emails, photographs, documents linking Layla to a series of art deals with suspicious authenticity. One photo showed a woman identical to Layla holding hands with a second woman, a near doppelganger. Another picture captured them in front of a Belgian art gallery, rumored to deal in forgeries. The timestamps suggested these were from a few years ago. Proof of her partnership with her twin, who is equally cunning. Moreau explained. They swindled me and they swindled others. I want them both to face justice. But your husband is in the way, blindly protecting her. Sarah felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, bitterness, heartbreak, and a strange sense of vindication. Part of her wanted to lash out at David. Part of her wanted to pity him. She also wondered what Moreau expected from her. Moreau eyed her. I need your help. Influence your husband to break ties with her. If he continues to shield her, she will only drag him further into the mud. And I suspect her sister lurks in the shadows, planning something bigger. Perhaps the blackmail we are hearing about Sarah, swallowed hard. What do you get out of this? His brow furrowed. Closure, justice, and the chance to salvage what's left of my reputation in Europe. Also a certain moral satisfaction in knowing these sisters don't dupe anyone else. They parted ways with a tense handshake. Sarah clutched the envelope as if it were a time bomb. Her marriage had been on the brink of collapse, but this new knowledge gave her a sense of responsibility. She had to warn David, if only to protect him from sinking deeper into a catastrophic scandal. She also felt a measure of compassion. Despite his betrayal, David was still the man she once loved, and no matter how furious she felt, she didn't want him ruined by these manipulations. That night she found herself driving to David's penthouse, not entirely sure how she would approach the subject. The envelope of evidence sat on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. She thought of all the ways this meeting could go. Would David believe her? Would Layla be there, spitting venom at Sarah's intrusion? One thing was certain: the next steps she took could determine the fate of both their futures and possibly save David from the greatest betrayal of his life. Sarah arrived at David's penthouse just after dusk, her nerves taut with urgency. The doorman let her in, without question. As she stepped off the private elevator, she found David pacing the living room phone clutched in hand. He froze when he saw her guilt, relief, and dread flashing across his face. "Sarah," he began. She raised a hand. "I know everything. I'm here to stop you from making a terrible mistake." Without another word, she extended the envelope Jean-Louis Moreau had given her. David took it, flipped through its contents, photographs of Layla and her twin emails, detailing suspicious art deals and banking documents that hinted at blackmail. His face tightened with disbelief. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. "From Moreau," Sarah said. "He claims Layla and her sister ran a sophisticated art scam, and now she's entangled you in it." David looked stunned. "Layla told me her sister set her up, that she's the victim here." "She also told you she'd be honest with investigators," Sarah countered. "Did she ever show you this?" She pointed to a photo of Layla and her sister, exchanging a thick envelope, both smiling. Before David could reply, Layla stepped out of a side room. Her hair was tousled, her eyes burning. "You're working with that man, Sarah. That manipulative monster." Sarah didn't flinch. "You've been hiding too much. If you're innocent, prove it. I was trying to protect David." Layla cried. "My sister threatened us both. I didn't plan to fall in love, but I did." Everything changed. Before David could react, Layla's phone buzzed. She paled, then bolted toward her bag. Her belongings spilled across the floor, lipstick's wallet and a folded note. Sarah snatched it up. "Swiss wire transfer instructions," she read aloud. "Is this your sister's next payment?" Layla's defenses crumbled. "I was going to handle it. I didn't want David dragged through this." "So you'd rather pay hush money than tell the truth?" Sarah's voice was tight with disgust. David stared at Layla, torn between fury and heartbreak. "You told me we were into this together, but you lied again. I had to." Layla shouted, tears streaming. "I knew if you doubted me, you'd walk away." David's face hardened. "And now I just might." The room fell into tense silence. Then quietly, David picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, dialing. "Let them figure out who's lying." Layla lunged for the phone, but Sarah stepped in her way. A moment later, the call connected. The decision was made. Sirens approached in the distance. Layla collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Sarah turned away, fighting back tears of her own, of betrayal, loss, and something like pity. The truth would unravel in the days to come. Investigators would trace the blackmail, expose the twins' identity, and sort through Layla's involvement. David's public image would take a hit, but it would survive. Whether his marriage did only time would tell. But for now, the storm outside mirrored the one within, and none of their lives would ever be the same. Betrayal, scandal, and secret identities. This story proves that even the most powerful among us can be undone by hidden truths. In the end, David Harrington learned the hard way that wealth and influence can't shield you from the consequences of deception. Sarah, despite her heartbreak, found renewed strength in confronting the lies head-on rather than remaining a silent victim. As for Layla or Linda, her fate was sealed by the very illusions she spun, reminding us that the truth always finds a way to surface.
Millionaire left his pregnant wife after the diagnosis, but she recovered and took it all. Millions of dollars can buy luxury cars, sprawling mansions, and the illusion of a perfect life. But deep within those glittering facades often lie secrets so profound they threaten to shatter everything. This is the story of a marriage born in promise and drowned in betrayal, of a pregnant wife cast aside by the one person sworn to protect her. When a devastating medical diagnosis sealed her fate, her wealthy husband made the cruelest choice. Yet from the rubble of heartbreak, a phoenix rose. She not only survived, she thrived. Her journey is a testament to resilience, a reminder that real power starts with the soul. Henry Coleman was the sort of man who wore ambition like a custom-tailored suit. At 32, he had already accumulated more money than his entire extended family had seen in their lifetimes. Born and raised in the suburbs of Sacramento, California, Henry had an affinity for risk-taking from an early age. He traded baseball cards in middle school with a calculated vigilance, always seeking the rare gem that others overlooked. By the time he entered high school, he had moved on to day trading small stocks with money borrowed from his supportive parents, convincing them his budding passion would blossom into a lucrative future. What truly set him apart, however, was his charisma. Henry possessed a magnetic energy that made people gravitate toward him. At social gatherings, he dominated the room without effort, weaving stories of his business conquests into epic tales that left his audience spellbound. His confidence was alluring even to those who claimed to see through it. Perhaps it was this confidence that eventually led him to Fiona. They met at a charity gala in downtown Sacramento, an event raising funds for cancer research. Fiona Townsend, then simply Fiona Townsend, not yet Fiona Coleman, was a volunteer there. She'd been folding pamphlets and placing them neatly on every table before the guests arrived. Henry, wearing an impeccably tailored navy blue suit, noticed her right away. Though she was just a volunteer that night, something about her warm smile and the earnest way she spoke about the fundraiser made an impression on him. Fiona came from a far more modest background. She grew up in a small home on the outskirts of the city, worked part-time jobs through college, and spent most of her time contributing to various volunteer causes. She had a genuine soul, the type who'd stay up all night comforting a grieving friend, or sacrifice her own comfort if it meant bringing a little bit of joy to someone else. It was this heart, so full of compassion, that ensnared Henry's interest the moment he watched her carefully position ribbons and balloons, ensuring every table looked perfectly presentable. He introduced himself as a benefactor for the event. A conversation sparked first about the charity, then about life. Fiona felt an immediate sense of caution, recognizing Henry's well-practiced charm, but he seemed genuinely interested in her opinions on philanthropic endeavors. As the gala continued, he came back to talk to her at every opportunity. By the end of the night, he'd asked her to join him for coffee, promising he only wanted to continue their fascinating discussion. Fiona hesitated, but something in his eyes, a hint of sincerity, amid all that polished bravado, convinced her to say yes. Coffee became dinner, and dinner became another date. Soon, Fiona found herself stepping into Henry's world of lavish meals, exclusive clubs, and influential connections. She wasn't entirely comfortable there. Her middle-class upbringing felt starkly at odds with Henry's high-rolling lifestyle, but she appreciated how he seemed to treasure her. The philanthropic side of Henry's life also impressed her. He donated significant sums to various charities, including the Cancer Research Foundation, where they'd met. While it was true that Henry's generosity occasionally doubled as a business strategy, helping him network with the right people, Fiona observed moments of genuine empathy in him. Moments that gave her hope this outwardly ambitious mogul possessed a softer center. When Henry proposed 6 months later, it felt quick, Yet she couldn't deny the whirlwind romance they'd shared. He dropped to one knee at a local botanical garden, a place Fiona adored for its serenity. She accepted. In that instant, her life seemed like an improbable fairy tale. She was marrying a man who had the world at his fingertips, and he was willing to share that world with her. For her parents, who lived on the lower end of the socio-economic ladder, it was a dream come true to see their daughter secure such a brilliant, successful partner. Within a year, they were wed at a lavish ceremony in Napa Valley, attended by industry titans and politicians. Henry often rubbed shoulders with. People praised the union as a match of brains and beauty, and every camera seemed drawn to Henry's triumphant smile. More intimate snapshots, however, showed Fiona's quiet warmth and the unassuming joy that made her so unique. Though Henry soared in the professional sphere, closing deals and multiplying his fortune, Fiona remained grounded. She spent her time volunteering and, when she wasn't at a charity event, she accompanied Henry on business trips. She helped him connect with communities and philanthropic projects, balancing out what sometimes felt like an obsession with profit. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it worked, thanks largely to Fiona's unwavering patience and Henry's willingness, at least initially, to compromise. One crisp January morning, Fiona woke up feeling a wave of nausea that caught her off guard. Thinking it might be just a stomach bug, she tried to brush it off. However, as the days passed, she found herself increasingly fatigued, with an unusually heightened sense of smell. The faint aroma of coffee would suddenly overwhelm her, churning her stomach. Suspecting something more, she purchased a home pregnancy test from a discreet pharmacy across town. While she and Henry had talked about having children someday, Fiona wasn't certain if this was the right time. She felt a flutter of excitement, but also worry about Henry's reaction. He was in the middle of a groundbreaking venture, something about a tech platform that would revolutionize financial analysis and working 14-hour days to ensure its success. The moment Fiona saw the positive lines, her heart pounded with a mix of joy and fear. She recalled how Henry sometimes spoke about fatherhood in hypothetical terms, always couched in disclaimers like "once everything settles down" or "when I've reached my next financial goal." Regardless, Fiona felt a surge of warmth bloom inside her. She was going to be a mother, an unplanned but, to her, welcome surprise. That evening, she decided to create the perfect atmosphere to share the news. She prepared Henry's favorite meal, roasted salmon in lemon butter sauce, and lit candles in their elegant dining room. She even dressed in a simple but elegant gown she knew he admired. Her plan was to reveal the pregnancy test result after dessert. However, Henry arrived home late, exhausted and visibly irritated. He dropped his briefcase on the marble floor with a thud, heading straight for a glass of whiskey at the bar. Though he forced a smile when he saw her preparations, the tension in his posture was undeniable. "I'm sorry," he muttered, loosening his tie. Investor meeting ran over, and then traffic was a nightmare. Undeterred, Fiona asked him to join her at the dining table. She tried to keep the meal warm in the oven, but some dishes had grown cold. Henry tried to look appreciative, but his gaze kept drifting to his phone. Sensing his distraction, Fiona decided to expedite her plan. She handed him a small velvet pouch after they finished eating. "Open it," she whispered, heart pounding. Henry pulled out the home pregnancy test, eyes widening in realization. "Are you serious?" he asked, voice tight. She nodded, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. "Yes, Henry, we're going to have a baby." For a flicker of a moment, she saw wonder in his expression, but as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by apprehension, almost dread. "That's wow," he said, forcing a half-hearted smile. "That's big news. It's just not the best timing." The words stung Fiona, though she tried not to let it show. "I know it's sudden," she conceded, but we talked about this someday. Maybe this is just earlier than expected. Henry gulped his whiskey. I need some time to process this, Fiona. My plate is already overflowing with work. That night he was distant. Fiona lay awake in bed, one hand over her stomach, wondering if Henry would truly come around. By the next morning he was gone before she woke, leaving a terse note, had an early flight to New York. We'll talk when I get back. Fiona swallowed her disappointment and tried to keep the spark of joy alive. Henry was ambitious, yes, but she hoped he would embrace fatherhood once he grasped the gravity of bringing new life into the world. Little did she know how deeply his fears and drive would begin to erode the foundation of their marriage. Henry's flight to New York was filled with conflicting thoughts and mounting pressures. He was on the verge of sealing a deal with an investment firm that could catapult his company into a new stratosphere of wealth. Yet the news that Fiona was pregnant had thrown him into emotional chaos. Once in Manhattan, he plunged into meetings. The city's towering skyscrapers and frenetic pace mirrored his internal state. During brief moments between negotiations, his mind wandered to thoughts of fatherhood images of cradling an infant, rearranging his schedule for pediatric appointments. The visions both excited and terrified him. Was he ready for this? Back in Sacramento, Fiona scheduled a doctor's appointment with Dr. Samantha Lee, the OB-GYN at Cedars-Sinai, whom she and Henry had donated to in previous philanthropic drives. Fiona arrived early, a bundle of nerves. After some tests and an ultrasound, Dr. Lee confirmed she was around 8 weeks along. The doctor's gentle reassurance drew tears of relief from Fiona's eyes. But the appointment came with a twist. Dr. Lee noted some irregularities in Fiona's liver enzymes, nothing critical yet, but worth monitoring. Pregnancy can put extra stress on the body, Dr. Lee explained. We'll run more tests to rule out any underlying condition. Fiona tried not to panic. She told herself it was likely just normal pregnancy-related changes. Still, a small knot of anxiety lodged in her chest. A week passed before Henry returned from New York, triumphant in his negotiations. He breezed through the door, briefcase in hand, his grin fading when he saw Fiona's apprehensive expression. She explained the medical findings. Dr. Lee is concerned I might have an autoimmune issue. I need more tests, Henry. He frowned, sinking into the sofa. Autoimmune issues, what does that mean? It could complicate the pregnancy, she replied, voice trembling. Doctor, Lee wants me to see a specialist. Henry's shoulders tensed. Look, whatever you need, we'll do it. But are we sure now's the best time for this? I mean, if it's dangerous. Fiona's heart clenched at the implication he might be hinting at. She hadn't even considered terminating the pregnancy. This baby is part of us, she managed, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. I'm not giving up, he sighed, nodding. Right. Fine, I just need to think. That night, Henry tossed and turned, consumed by guilt and fear. Fiona felt more alone than ever, clinging to the hope that he'd come around. But as the weeks passed, his business demands only intensified, and his emotional distance grew. Fiona was left to navigate a precarious health challenge with minimal support from the one person whose presence she needed most. Fiona's appointment with the specialist doctor, Christopher Brown, marked the start of a new reality. Dr. Brown was a respected maternal fetal medicine expert in his early 50s. Tall and calm, he carried a reputation for guiding high-risk pregnancies with compassionate expertise. He reviewed Fiona's records, asked detailed questions, and recommended a series of tests. It appears your immune system might be producing certain antibodies that could affect your organs and the baby's development, he said gently. We'll monitor closely, and there are medications that can help, but it's crucial you follow up often. His words landed with sobering weight. Fiona tried to quell her mounting anxiety. What about stress, she asked, Recalling Dr. Lee's warning, Dr. Brown offered a sad smile. Stress can exacerbate autoimmune disorders. Try to keep calm, rest, and get emotional support. Fiona thought of Henry's incessant absences, the tension in their once happy home. She forced a nod, promising to do her best. In the following weeks, she submerged herself in medical appointments and quiet self-care. She took gentle walks, practiced prenatal yoga, and prepared healthy meals that might bolster her immune system. Friends from her volunteer circles rallied around, providing rides to the hospital whenever Henry was unavailable. Meanwhile, Henry found himself more immersed in his business empire than ever before. The success of his latest deal led to more partnerships, each demanding a piece of him. Between flights and meetings, his moments at home were fleeting, and even then, he seemed preoccupied. One night, Fiona laid out her latest ultrasound images on the kitchen table, hoping to spark some fatherly excitement. Henry barely glanced at them before muttering something about an urgent email. As her pregnancy advanced, Fiona sensed a gaping chasm opening between them. Henry's polite responses and occasional apologies didn't soften the feeling of abandonment she felt, especially as her health remained in delicate balance. One weekend, he returned from a trip to Dallas, particularly agitated, ranting about investor demands. Fiona tried to comfort him, but he shrugged her off with a dismissive, "I just need some space." That brief exchange rattled Fiona. She realized Henry was slipping away, possibly seeking an escape from the emotionally fraught atmosphere at home. The once glamorous life they shared now seemed more like a performance, with Fiona cast in the role of a lonely spectator and Henry the ever-distant star. Fiona woke one morning to find Henry already gone. This was not unusual, but it still stung. His typical note was replaced by a curt text called Redwood Financial about some documents. "They'll need your signature." Confused, she poured herself a cup of herbal tea and tried to distract herself from the wave of nausea returning with the pregnancy's progress. Later that afternoon, a call came in from Redwood Financial. A polite woman named Michelle explained that Henry had set up a trust arrangement. Fiona was to sign several legal documents that would finalize the transfer of certain assets. Fiona, taken aback, asked that the documents be emailed so she could review them. She opened the file on her laptop, only to be confronted by reams of dense legal language, references to an irrevocable trust, clauses limiting beneficiary rights, and fine print disclaimers. She left a message for Henry, asking for clarity, but received only a generic text in reply, "Busy. Will explain later." Alarmed, Fiona reached out to an old college friend, Mark Johnson, now an attorney. After scanning the documents, Mark's tone darkened. "It looks like Henry is compartmentalizing significant assets into a trust you won't have ready access to. If something goes wrong like a divorce, you could be cut off from these funds." Fiona felt a sharp pang of betrayal, tears filling her eyes. Why would he do that now? Mark cleared his throat gently. "Could be standard estate planning, could also be more. You need to be cautious." That evening, Fiona confronted Henry in their living room, documents in hand. "I got a call from Redwood Financial. What's this about a trust that excludes me?" Henry, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, bristled at the accusation. "It's just business, Fiona," he said, face tight. "I have investors. I need to protect certain assets." "Protect from whom?" Fiona asked, her voice trembling. "From me?" He looked away. "It's not personal. My legal team advised me to set this up to shield funds. It's best for the company." "It's best for you," Fiona fired back. "I'm your wife, Henry. I'm pregnant and sick. You didn't even talk to me before doing this?" He grimaced, an undercurrent of guilt slipping through his irritation. "I'm sorry. Things are complicated. Let's not blow this out of proportion." But it was too late. The trust documents stood as damning evidence of Henry's commitment to his empire above all else. Fiona walked away, clutching the pages, her mind swirling with a dread she could no longer ignore. Over the following weeks, Fiona threw herself into managing her health. Dr. Brown's regimen of medications and frequent checkups began stabilizing some of her concerning symptoms. She also attempted to keep her stress under control, though the situation with Henry weighed heavily on her heart. She sought solace in the small victories of pregnancy, the fluttery sensation of the baby kicking, the improvement in her lab results, the unwavering support from friends. Angela White, in particular, proved a steadfast ally, picking Fiona up for doctor's appointments whenever Henry was unavailable, an increasingly common occurrence. Henry, meanwhile, rented a sleek penthouse apartment downtown, initially framing it as a temporary crash pad for overnight business stays. But days turned into a week, and he barely returned to their home. Their once shared mansion, filled with polished floors and designer furniture, became a silent stage on which Fiona battled her anxieties alone. The loneliness became intolerable one afternoon when she received a call from Redwood Financial again. They demanded her signature on additional documents related to shifting assets. This time, Fiona refused and told them she wanted her own lawyer's review first. She sensed the momentum of Henry's strategy. He was insulating himself financially, apparently preparing for a worst-case scenario. Her suspicions confirmed, Fiona dialed Mark Johnson. "I won't sign anything," she said, her voice quivering. "I want to protect myself and my child. Henry's barely around. I'm scared he's leaving me for good." Mark listened patiently, advising her to document everything and ensure she didn't lose her rightful share of assets. Fiona appreciated his calm professionalism, but the emotional toll pressed heavily on her. She lay awake at night, one hand on her growing belly, trying to quell the fear of raising a child alone while also battling health complications. One day, after yet another lonely prenatal class, she found Henry waiting at the house. He'd come to collect more of his belongings, or so he said. She confronted him in the foyer, fighting tears. "Henry, can we please talk?" she pleaded. "Are you moving out for good?" He avoided her gaze, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm not abandoning you, Fiona. I just need space. My work, my stress. I can't focus with all this, she repeated, heart twisting. "You mean me, my illness, our child?" he exhaled, looking momentarily pained. "That's not fair. You know it's more complicated than that." Fiona pressed a hand to her abdomen, feeling the baby move as if in protest. "I'm fighting to keep myself and our baby healthy, Henry. But you're busy insulating yourself from us financially. That's the reality." Henry said nothing, merely gathered his suitcases and left. The shutting of the front door resonated through the cavernous hall, echoing the finality of his departure. Fiona sank onto a nearby chair, tears slipping down her cheeks as the baby shifted inside her, a poignant reminder she was no longer just fighting for herself. Henry's new penthouse offered a panoramic view of Sacramento, an ambitious businessman's dream. But no matter how impressive the skyline, guilt gnawed at him. He told himself he was doing this for everyone's benefit. Fiona needed a calm environment, he reasoned. Yet a part of him knew the truth. He was running from emotional responsibility. Work devoured his days. His tech platform was on the verge of a major launch, and every detail demanded his attention. He told himself he'd make it up to Fiona once the chaos subsided, once he secured the biggest success of his career. Yet nights in the penthouse felt hollow. He slept fitfully, haunted by the memory of Fiona's tear-streaked face. Back at the mansion, Fiona found her days long and exhausting. Her autoimmune condition flared unpredictably, causing bouts of pain and nausea. She relied heavily on Dr. Brown's treatments and Angela's steadfast kindness. Though physically drained, her spirit remained unexpectedly resilient. Late one evening, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Answering cautiously, she heard a warm, familiar voice. "Fiona? It's Angela. I'm at the hospital. You need to get down here." Alarm coursed through her. "Hospital? What's wrong?" "It's Henry," Angela said quietly. "He collapsed at a meeting. They think it's sheer exhaustion or stress, but I figured you should know." Despite everything, Fiona's heart lurched with concern. She threw on a jacket and rushed to the hospital. Angela met her in the waiting area, her face drawn with worry. "Where is he?" Fiona asked, breathless. Angela pointed down the hall. "He's stable now, but they're doing tests. They said it's stress-related. He's been pushing himself too hard." Fiona felt an odd mixture of sympathy and frustration. She approached Henry's room cautiously. He lay in the hospital bed, eyes closed, and the fourth drip ran into his arm, and his phone, ever present, rested on the bedside table. When he sensed her presence, his eyes flickered open, and a wave of embarrassment crossed his features. "What are you doing here?" he asked softly, clearing his throat. She swallowed. "Angela called me. I came because Henry, you're still my husband." He laughed bitterly. "Some husband I've been." They stared at each other in tense silence. Eventually, Henry looked away. "Doctor says I've got dangerously high blood pressure." Ironic, isn't it? I'm the one always preaching self-control, and now I can't even control my own stress. Fiona edged closer to the bed, arms folded protectively over her belly. "This can't keep going on. We're destroying ourselves, Henry." He nodded weakly, pain etched into the lines on his face. "I know." But even in that moment of vulnerability, Fiona sensed a wall between them. He was still that driven businessman, clinging to the remnants of control. She could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, as though he was already figuring out how to spin this setback into a win. When the doctor allowed Henry to be discharged, Fiona offered him a ride home. He declined, insisting he had a car service waiting. She watched him leave the hospital lobby, shoulders slumped. Sadness washed over her. Their marriage felt like a frayed tapestry, threads unraveling from all sides. As she made her way back to her car, she pressed a hand to her abdomen. The baby kicked, and she closed her eyes, whispering a silent vow. "No matter what happens with Henry, I'll protect you." For the first time, she acknowledged the possibility that she might have to raise her child alone. The next few weeks brought a series of jolts to Fiona's already delicate state. Her autoimmune symptoms intensified, leading to unpredictable bouts of fever and fatigue. Dr. Brown tweaked her medication, cautioning her yet again about the dangers of stress. One rainy afternoon, Fiona sat in her living room, flipping through medical bills and insurance forms. She hated feeling powerless, yet that was the exact state she found herself in, dependent on Henry's money, Henry's decisions, Henry's fleeting moments of concern. Just as she felt her resolve slipping, the doorbell rang. It was Mark Johnson, his expression guarded. He held a folder under his arm. "Fiona, I've been looking deeper into Henry's financial moves. You need to see this." She ushered him inside, heart pounding. They sat in the living room as Mark explained what he'd discovered. Henry had been transferring large sums of money into offshore accounts for the past few months. The trust arrangement was only part of a larger plan to insulate his assets. "He's moving his money out of reach," Mark said gently. "If he decides to walk away, you could be left with far less than you think." Fiona's eyes brimmed with tears of betrayal. She gazed around the lavish mansion, now revealed as a fragile facade. "So I'm basically facing the prospect of him abandoning me financially and emotionally while I'm pregnant and dealing with a serious health condition." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I won't let that happen. We can file certain claims or even a legal separation to protect you and the baby. But you need to decide how far you want to go." Fiona stared at the folder in her lap, feeling a swell of anger. This was her life, a life she had built with Henry, under the assumption that love and partnership meant support, not abandonment. She clenched her jaw. Do whatever it takes to secure what my child and I need. I won't let him hang us out to dry. Mark nodded, rising to leave. I'll prepare the paperwork. Call me when you're ready. After he left, Fiona sank into the couch, heart throbbing with a mingled sense of loss and determination. Her phone buzzed. It was Henry, texting to say he'd be out of town for business again. She almost laughed at the dark irony. He'd left her to fend for herself, all the while siphoning off the wealth he claimed was theirs. She curled a hand around her belly, feeling the baby move. We'll be okay, she whispered, voice trembling. I'll fight for you with everything I have. That night, Angela stopped by with groceries and a hug, just as the tears began to overwhelm Fiona. They sat in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound between them for a while. I can't believe he's doing this, Fiona said shakily. How did we get here? Angela squeezed her hand. Sometimes people reveal who they truly are under pressure. You need to focus on getting through your pregnancy and protecting your future. Henry's made his choices. Fiona nodded, steeling herself. She might have once been the sweet volunteer with a heart full of trust, but life had forced her to adapt. She wasn't just a victim, she was a mother to be with a responsibility to survive, even if it meant going to war with the man she once loved more than life itself. As Henry's offshore dealings deepened, fate delivered a curveball that rattled his empire. The ambitious tech platform he'd been developing faltered during its beta launch. Investors grew skittish. Stock valuations seesawed. Henry spent sleepless nights firefighting PR disasters while scrambling to patch the platform's technical flaws. The mounting stress took a visible toll. Dark circles ringed Henry's eyes, and his shoulders sagged beneath the weight of looming deadlines and potential lawsuits. He avoided Fiona entirely, convinced his presence would only heighten both their anxieties. Instead, he poured every ounce of energy into salvaging his company's crown jewel. Fiona, however, had her own crisis to face. One afternoon, she collapsed at home, seized by sharp abdominal pains and dizziness. Angela rushed over, finding Fiona pale and barely conscious. An ambulance sped Fiona to the hospital, where Dr. Brown discovered her blood pressure had skyrocketed dangerously. Henry, alerted by a frantic text from Angela, appeared at the hospital a few hours later, visibly shaken. He found Fiona in a private room, hooked to the fourth drips and monitors. She looked fragile, her once lively eyes dulled by pain. "I'm sorry," he whispered, approaching her bed. "I came as soon as I could." Fiona managed a faint nod, though she couldn't muster much energy to speak. Angela stood by her side, arms crossed, her glare conveying a silent admonishment to Henry. Dr. Brown arrived moments later, explaining that while they'd stabilized Fiona for now, her condition remained precarious. Stress, he emphasized again, was a significant threat to her and the baby. Henry sank into a chair, staring at the medical equipment. Guilt gnawed at him. As he looked at Fiona's wan complexion, he realized how close he was to losing everything that truly mattered. The ambition, the deals, the offshore accounts, none of it felt meaningful if it meant endangering the life of his wife and unborn child. He stayed at her bedside that night, phone switched off for the first time in ages. The hospital's fluorescent lights reflected off the antiseptic floors, casting sterile shadows across Fiona's face. She dozed in fitful spurts, occasionally waking to glance at Henry before drifting off again. By morning, Dr. Brown announced that Fiona was stable but recommended a longer hospital stay. Henry stepped into the corridor to take a call from his coup, who delivered grim news about potential investor lawsuits. For once, Henry couldn't muster any reaction. The only lawsuit that mattered was the one he waged against fate. desperately trying to keep Fiona and their baby alive. When he returned to Fiona's room, she gave him a weak, sad smile. "Go," she whispered. "Handle your crisis." He shook his head. "No, I'm staying. I can't keep running." But as the day wore on, his phone buzzed non-stop with urgent messages. Fiona saw him pacing in the hallway, torn between two worlds. In the end, she closed her eyes, letting the steady beep of the heart monitor lull her into a restless sleep. She couldn't force Henry to be the husband she needed. He had to choose that path himself. A few days later, Fiona was discharged from the hospital with strict orders for bed rest and minimal stress. Henry pleaded with her to come to his penthouse, arguing it was closer to the hospital and that he could arrange private nursing care there. Exhausted and eager for peace, she agreed. The penthouse was pristine and modern, a testament to Henry's taste for sleek lines and cutting-edge technology. A private nurse named Lily Smith greeted Fiona warmly, helping her to a spacious guest bedroom. Despite the luxurious surroundings, the atmosphere felt more clinical than cozy. Henry attempted to be more present. He rescheduled meetings to work from home, frequently checking in on Fiona's vitals. But the tension between them remained. Their once intimate conversations had turned polite and perfunctory. Fiona felt like a guest in Henry's domain rather than a partner in his life. One night, restless on the plush penthouse couch, Fiona heard Henry on a phone call in the adjacent room. She caught snippets of phrases like offshore assets and trust limitations. Her stomach twisted. Even now, amidst her fragile state, Henry continued to orchestrate his financial safety net. But fate wouldn't wait for them to figure things out. Early the next morning, Fiona jolted awake with excruciating abdominal pains. She gasped, struggling to breathe. Lily rushed in, checking Fiona's blood pressure. It was dangerously high again. An ambulance was summoned. Henry stumbled out of his room, disoriented, and followed in a daze as they whisked Fiona to the hospital. In the frantic blur that followed, Dr. Brown delivered grim news. The baby was showing signs of distress, and Fiona's body was nearing a breaking point. They had little choice but to perform an emergency C-section to save both mother and child. Henry stood outside the operating room, numb with panic. Memories of lavish galas and triumphant boardroom deals flashed through his mind, now rendered meaningless compared to the life or death stakes playing out behind those double doors. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Brown emerged. "You have a daughter," he said, offering a reassuring nod. "She's premature but stable. We'll keep her in the NICU for close observation. Fiona's lost a lot of blood, but we've stabilized her as well. She's in recovery." Relief collided with guilt in Henry's chest, tears burning his eyes. A father. He was a father now, yet he couldn't quell the dread that his own choices had contributed to this harrowing ordeal. When he was finally allowed to see Fiona, she lay pale and exhausted, a tangle of tubes and monitors surrounding her bed. "Henry," she rasped, her eyes fluttering open. "The baby, is she okay?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "She's in the NICU, but Dr. Brown says she'll be fine." Tears formed in Fiona's eyes, and he gently took her hand, squeezing it. In that moment, he realized how close he'd come to losing them both. No empire, no offshore account, no ambition could ever replace the miracle fighting for life in the NICU, or the woman lying in this hospital bed. He stayed by Fiona's side, phone off, as the hours slid into night. At some point, exhaustion claimed her, and he sat watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. A man with wealth beyond most imaginations, he had never felt more vulnerable. But in that vulnerability lay the beginning of what could be genuine change if he had the courage to follow through. In the weeks after Grace's dramatic birth, Fiona remained in the hospital to recover, while their newborn daughter fought to gain strength in the NICU. Henry spent his days shuttling between the two, splitting his time between Grace's incubator and Fiona's recovery room. The hospital became their temporary home, stripping away any veneer of high society and luxury. Money meant little in the face of medical uncertainties. Henry found himself enthralled by Grace's delicate features each time he peeked into her incubator. She was tiny, hooked to monitors and tubes, but each day brought small improvements an ounce gained, a slight increase in stable breathing. He asked endless questions of the NICU nurses, determined to understand every aspect of her care. To his own surprise, the thrill of fatherhood overshadowed his once consuming hunger for business conquests. Fiona's healing process was slow but steady. Physically drained and emotionally exhausted, she spent hours asleep, awakened periodically by doctors checking vitals. Whenever she was lucid, Henry stayed close, updating her on Grace's progress. Occasionally, she'd see a tenderness in his eyes that reminded her of the man she first fell in love with. Still, the scars of betrayal lay fresh. She couldn't simply forget how he'd abandoned her in the darkest months of her pregnancy. Angela and Mark visited regularly, bringing care packages and unwavering moral support. Mark gently reminded Fiona to keep certain legal protections in mind, though he respected her need to focus on recovering rather than diving into another battle with Henry. In unguarded moments, Fiona wondered if Henry's shift in behavior was genuine or simply an emotional reflex to the crisis they'd endured. After nearly a month, Grace improved enough to be discharged, though she required close outpatient monitoring. Fiona, also stabilized, left the hospital around the same time. Henry arranged for them to stay at the penthouse, citing easy access to top-tier medical facilities. He even hired a private pediatric nurse to assist with Grace's specialized care. Those early days at home were chaotic and magical in equal measure. Grace cried at all hours, but the moments of holding her close, rocking her, feeling her tiny fingers curl around theirs, melted Fiona's heart. For the first time, Henry seemed fully present, cooking simple meals, running errands, and waking in the middle of the night to soothe Grace when she fussed. Yet, for all his efforts, Fiona struggled to let her guard down. She wasn't sure how to reconcile the attentive father Henry was becoming with the calculating businessman who had siphoned assets offshore. One evening, as she rocked Grace to sleep, Henry approached quietly. "I've missed so much," he whispered, gazing at Grace with awe. "I don't want to miss another moment of her life." Fiona studied his face, recalling the whirlwind of betrayal that had brought them to this juncture. "Henry, I want to believe you, but trust doesn't just snap back." He nodded, looking remorseful. "I understand. All I can do is try every day to show you I've changed." She turned her gaze to Grace, sleeping in her arms. The tiny heartbeat that pulsed in that fragile body was a testament to survival against impossible odds. She realized that she, too, carried a capacity for resilience she'd never known before. Whether or not Henry truly changed, she would always be able to stand on her own. For now, they existed in a cautious dance, each uncertain but hopeful that the near tragedy of Grace's birth might open a path to genuine reconciliation. In the months that followed, Henry strove to prove his commitment to both Fiona and Grace. He scaled back his office hours, delegated more tasks, and eased off the globe-trotting lifestyle. His focus pivoted from growth at all costs to ensuring the family's well-being. He even began attending therapy, acknowledging that his issues with control and fear of vulnerability had fueled many of his previous decisions. Fiona appreciated the shift, yet remained wary. She spent her days bonding with Grace and managing her own health, which, thanks to Dr. Brown's regimen, was slowly stabilizing. Each time Henry mentioned business deals or offshore accounts, anxiety fluttered through her. She wasn't naive about how quickly priorities could shift once daily pressures resumed. One evening, Henry surprised Fiona by inviting her to a small dinner at the penthouse. Dressed casually for the first time in ages, he prepared a modest pasta dish. Though it was slightly overcooked, Fiona was touched by the genuine effort. Over candlelight, he reached across the table. "I've terminated the offshore transfers," he said, his voice earnest, "and I dissolved that trust. Everything I was doing to protect my assets, I've undone it. Mark can verify. I want to make things right." Fiona's fork paused midway to her mouth. The revelation left her momentarily stunned. "You did?" He nodded, eyes reflecting sincerity. "I've seen what really matters. No more secrets, Fiona." Her chest constricted with a mixture of hope and caution. "It'll take me time to fully believe it," she admitted. He bowed his head. "I know. I'll wait as long as it takes." Still, life rarely grants smooth sailing. A few days later, a summons arrived at the penthouse from an investor who felt misled by Henry's earlier tech platform fiasco. They were suing for damages, claiming financial losses tied to Henry's alleged overpromises. The news rattled the household. Fiona, already anxious, worried how another crisis might pull Henry away. "This could drag on for years," he muttered, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "I can't let it ruin everything we've built." Fiona felt a stab of fear. She recalled the Henry who would shut her out at the first sign of business trouble. Yet the new Henry surprised her. Rather than diving headlong into battle, he considered settling. "I hate paying them off," he admitted, "but it might be the best way to avoid a prolonged fight." In the end, Henry chose the settlement route, swallowing his pride for the sake of familial stability. The payout was significant, but it stemmed the tide of legal scrutiny. When all was finalized, Henry collapsed onto the living room sofa, emotionally spent. Fiona sat beside him, resting a hand on his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for putting us first." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting genuine regret and relief. "After almost losing you and Grace, I realized I can't measure my life by net worth alone." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder. She remembered lying alone in a cold hospital bed, thinking Henry had abandoned her forever. The memory still hurt, but perhaps they had reached an inflection point. If his actions continued matching his words, maybe their family had a shot at real unity. Time brought steady healing to both Grace and Fiona. By the time Grace was 6 months old, she was hitting baby milestones, rolling over, babbling, reaching for toys. Fiona's autoimmune condition stabilized under Dr. Brown's vigilant eye, and her energy levels improved enough that she began revisiting some philanthropic ideas. The near-death ordeal had awakened a desire in Fiona to champion healthcare causes. She wanted to help other women facing high-risk pregnancies. Henry, seeing her passion rekindled, encouraged it wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, he wrestled with his own professional crossroads. After nearly losing everything, the unrelenting drive that once fueled him had dimmed. He quietly explored selling parts of his business, no longer enthralled by endless expansions. One late evening, after coaxing Grace back to sleep, Fiona discovered Henry in his home office, sifting through financial statements. Her chest tightened, recalling past deceptions. But this time Henry looked up with a weary smile. "I'm thinking of selling one of my subsidiaries," he admitted. "There's a good offer on the table, and I don't need to own everything. It might be time to focus on what really matters." Fiona stepped closer, heart pounding with cautious optimism. "Like what?" He shrugged, gesturing around the penthouse that had once symbolized his ambition. "You, Grace, a balanced life. Maybe using some of this fortune for genuine good. I don't have to be that cutthroat mogul anymore." Fiona studied him, seeing sincerity in his eyes. In that moment, she recalled the day she first saw him at a charity gala, drawn by his charm but hopeful about his philanthropic side. Perhaps this was the Henry she'd sensed all along, the one overshadowed by greed and fear. Weeks passed, and Henry finalized the sale of his subsidiary for a substantial sum. True to his word, he donated a portion to the children's hospital that had helped save Grace's life. Fiona stood beside him during the ceremonial check presentation, pride glowing in her chest. With looming business pressures eased, Henry immersed himself in fatherhood. He learned how to calm Grace's colic, how to make her giggle with silly faces, how to read her a bedtime story in soothing tones. Fiona, in turn, invested her rekindled energy into organizing a charity gala aimed at supporting mothers with complicated pregnancies, a cause close to her heart. Their relationship wasn't magically perfect. Trust once broken doesn't mend overnight. Yet every day, Henry and Fiona took small steps toward understanding and forgiving each other. They learned to communicate better, sometimes with the help of a marriage counselor. And with each shared laugh over Grace's antics, they inched closer to rekindling the love that once felt lost. Nearly a year after Grace's precarious birth, Fiona stood on a small stage in a grand ballroom for the survivors' charity gala. Lights glimmered off high ceilings, illuminating round tables set for donors and supporters. This event was deeply personal, embodying Fiona's journey from desperate hospital nights to triumphant new beginnings. Backstage, Henry cradled Grace, who gurgled happily in her ruffled dress. He watched Fiona approach the podium, remembering the timid volunteer he'd first encountered. Now she radiated quiet confidence, her story poised to inspire others. "Good evening," Fiona began, voice resonant in the hushed ballroom. "I stand here not just as a survivor, but as a mother who almost lost her life, bringing a child into this world. Tonight's gala is a celebration of resilience of every woman who has ever been told her pregnancy was too risky, her body too weak." Polite applause swelled, and Fiona continued, describing how the funds would benefit research and supportive programs for women facing high-risk pregnancies. Each word was infused with the authenticity of lived experience, drawing tears and admiration from the crowd. Henry, holding Grace, felt an unaccustomed swell of awe. The woman he'd hurt, the woman he'd nearly lost, stood poised and unbroken, channeling her pain into a cause that would help countless others. For the first time, he fully understood the depth of her strength and just how fortunate he was to be by her side. When the final auction item sold, the event organizer announced a record-breaking total. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some hurried to congratulate Fiona, while others praised Henry for matching donations. Cameras flashed, capturing their family in a moment of triumph. Yet, amid the applause, Henry had one more surprise. With Grace settled comfortably in his arms, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Fiona's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring, a symbol of renewal rather than old promises. "Fiona," Henry said, his voice trembling slightly, "I know I broke your trust in ways. Words alone can't repair, but I've spent every day of this past year trying to become a man worthy of you and Grace. Will you marry me again?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. The memory of hospital rooms, legal threats, and heartbreak still lingered, but so did the warmth of Henry's steady presence these past months. She glanced at Grace, who stared up at them with innocent wonder, and then back at Henry. "Yes," she whispered, voice quavering. "Yes, I'll marry you again." Applause thundered around them, guests moved by the raw display of devotion. Henry slipped the ring onto Fiona's finger, and they embraced, Grace giggling between them. It wasn't a perfect ending to a fairy tale. It was the start of a life built on second chances, a life more real and profound than any fleeting dream of riches. In the months that followed, Henry and Fiona renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony at the same botanical garden where he had first proposed. Surrounded by a handful of close friends and family, they promised to support each other through all storms, no longer blinded by unchecked ambition or hidden fears. Angela stood as Fiona's bridesmaid, while Mark Johnson, who had safeguarded Fiona's interests, officiated the ceremony, a reflection of how integral he'd become to their family's better future. With sincere effort and mutual respect, they forged ahead. Henry scaled back his once overwhelming empire, channeling funds into charitable projects dear to Fiona's heart. Grace thrived into a curious toddler, her laughter a fixture in their home. And Fiona herself emerged a force in the philanthropic world, using her story to champion healthcare reforms and maternal support programs. They had faced the brink of devastation, a marriage on life support, a child born prematurely, financial betrayals, and health crises. But through the crucible of adversity, they discovered what truly mattered: love, resilience, and the simple fact that life's greatest treasures can't be stored in offshore accounts. It's not a fairy tale with a neat ending. It's the ongoing story of two flawed people choosing to heal together every single day. New beginnings can bloom in the darkest seasons, and Fiona's remarkable journey proves just that. After all the betrayals, the heartbreak, and the life-threatening moments, she emerged stronger, securing her health, protecting her child, and even rebuilding her marriage on firmer ground. Her courage reminds us that resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about facing it head-on and daring to rewrite the ending. Now, we want you to be part of spreading Fiona's empowering message.